Busted, overpowered, carry set, cheesy, no skill. That is what we're going to look at today, guys. So stay tuned. Hey, it's Dan, and welcome back to Unified Gaming. Now, as you can already guess, we're going to look at which sets are broken on the Elder Scrolls Online for PvP, focusing on the current patch. As with all of these things, they are personal preference, and what I think is busted, a bit cheesy, overpowered, might vary from what you think. So I'd love to know, do you agree? Do you disagree? Have I missed something? Do let me know in the comments. But with the scale and the kind of how it's done for today, I've made what I call the cheese scale. And the idea is that if it's busted, it's obviously on the scale somewhere, and some things are stronger than other things. So things that are they're not too bad, but they're a bit stronger than other things. And if it's like ridiculously strong and makes you like a god, then obviously that's a vintage strength cheese. So the idea is that when you go through and look at some sets that I think are pretty busted, in all honesty, a bit overtuned, and kind of where do they go on this scale, why is that, and I will be looking at it from a sort of a battlegrounds, duels and Cyrodiil perspective, so you get a really good idea of why is this really overtuned, and obviously some things are overtuned for certain classes. Oh, and if you haven't guessed it already, this channel is all about helping you get better at next level builds, guides and gameplay. So why not start improving today by subscribing and turn on the bell so you don't miss anything. Now let's get started. Now, a good old favourite of everybody's, the Troll King, or just often called Troll King. This set, if you're unaware, is just like a stupid amount of health recovery. And health recovery isn't like a massive thing, like, oh, that's not too bad. But the problem is that it's not 1548 that it states. So if you're playing CP Cyrodiil with how the game kind of multiplies stuff, that's more like an 1800 to 2k health regen buff, which is quite significant actually, especially if you put on potions it can go up way higher. It's for you and anybody you heal as well, so put this on a healer and everybody gets like really high sort of health regen. Put this on like a roly-poly build where you got loads of well fitted, you could actually roll dodge your way to full health. You see how annoying it is. So for me, this is a very strong set. It's cheesy as a result, it's a strong cheese set. Our next set is Eternal Hunt. And for me, this is a really kind of get out of jail button card thing that you have. It's literally just so irritating to fight against. Any stamina Nightblade that has this basically is unkillable if played well, because you just roll dodge, you leave a room behind you. People get immobilized if they walk into it, so they can't just directly chase you because they get locked in place. You then get another 2, maybe 3 seconds to cloak away, to retreat, to reposition. As such, it's really annoying to fight against, and there's no cooldown. So you can literally go roll, and leave rune, and that is the problem. The rune hits somewhat hard, but the immobilize is the problem. And as such, it is a medium strength cheese, because if you run it, you get loads of advantages for very little penalties. So yeah, it's a medium strength cheese. The next set is Zarn. Now Zarn is a busted damage set. If you're unaware, it basically puts like a line of fire from you to the target that just gets up and up and up and up in damage. And you can also amplify this damage as well with things like Elfbane, with things like Incap or Soul Harvest. So if you put this on like a Magical Nightblade, for example, with Fear, yeah, you get lots of lulls. You get lots and lots of lulls. I have done this in the past. It is really busted. You also become quite tanky in a one-on-one situation as well, because they can't attack you in melee range. So like all stamina users kind of do need to kind of fear you if you're using this set. So yeah, for me this is vintage cheese. Our next set is Coward's Gear. Now this set is a little bit annoying to fight against, in all honesty. It's really good to line of sight. Like, yes, you do give up some damage or some defense if you kind of run this, but because you move really fast when you sprint and you take so little damage because of major protection, is why it's really frustrating to fight against. And because of that, it is a mild cheat. Anything with major protection with a high uptime I think is a little bit busted because of just how much damage it reduces. Now Engine Guardian is a really good monster set in that it gives you loads of resources when you need it. It also summons a little pet that people can attack and not you, and because of that it does make it a little bit cheesy, especially on Sorcerer, where you can convert obviously the stamina into Magicka or the Magicka into stamina. You also get health back from it. It obviously absorbs damage because people hit it and not you. It gives you health, so if you've got the health one on, you're pretty much unkillable. So it's really frustrating to fight against in a duel especially, and in kind of open world Cyrodiil or Battlegrounds if you're on a Magsork or a Stamsork. So for me, it's a little bit cheesy. It's a mild strength cheese. It's not overly overpowered, but it can be frustrating to fight against, and that's why it's on the scale. Our next set is Warrior's Fury, often called Fury. Now, if you're unaware, this basically gives you damage when you take damage, which is a really cool idea. It gives you that kind of turn and burn playstyle. The problem is that the damage that this set gives you is just so much more than any other sort of damage set in the game, pretty much. And it's not hard to sort of have it anyway. You just put it on in CP. You take damage, you can take very little damage in CP anyway, so it's easy to get a really high uptime, thus higher heals, thus allowing you to stay alive even longer to get more damage, and you see it quickly compounds and you can be buffed with Major Brutality. And so for me, it's a little bit cheesy because actually everybody runs it nowadays because it's such a strong set, and that tells you if everybody's using it, it's probably a strong set or the other sets are pretty bad. You read into that as you see, but for me it's a little bit cheesy, so it's a mild strength cheese. Our next set is Shadow of the Red Mountain. Now this set isn't horrifically bad in all honesty, but if you pair it with the right build and the right other sets with it, it can be heavily abused, and that is the problem, that any set that gives you free damage for no real effort is a little bit busted because it doesn't take any thumbs to play the build then. And so for me, I do think this is a little bit cheesy. It's a bit of a mild strength cheese, it's not horrific in all honesty, but if you pair it right it can be heavily abused, especially in Battlegrounds and in duels, but mainly in Battlegrounds. The next set is Plague Slinger. Now this is very similar to Shadow of the Red Mountain, but instead of when you do damage, it's when you take damage. And it does the same kind of proc. When you take damage, you shoot balls of poison at people doing damage, you shoot a couple of them, so 5 of them in total. Really irritating to fight against in a duel and in Battlegrounds especially. If you pair this with Red Mountain, and with something like Valken Scoria, you've got a disgusting build where you just put all your points in health, and your damage comes from your sets, which against a bad player, you will kill them quite easily as a tank, which is absolutely ridiculous. So for me, it is a mild cheese, can be abused, but it's not horrific. Listen to this next set and hear me out, okay? Wizard's Riposte. Why is it busted? Well, Wizard's Riposte is like one of the best damage reduction sets in the game. Minor Maim, if you're unaware, is basically a straight kind of subtraction on the target, which means that the damage that they do is significantly less if you put that against somebody, to the point you're doing you reduce 1,000 to 2,000 damage per hit. If they land a combo of say 3 hits on you, that's like 3,000 to 6,000 damage you've just negated completely, which is quite a lot of damage reduction, and it applies on any person that hits you crits because crits are really high, especially the chance. And what's more, it can apply to multiple targets. And for me, why this is such a great set is because it gives you health, damage and recovery in the 2, 3 and 4 pieces, so you can put this on like most light armor classes and it will make you really kind of good. It's a really good kind of set to just pick up a class, play around with it, get used to kind of how you rotate and stuff, and then you can switch out for something a bit stronger, more offensive. And if you're missing CP, say you're like 600 CP and you're like, oh I don't have the full or even less, chuck this on and you can actually go into open world Cyrodiil with CP with a decent CP loadout and this set, and you'll be able to fight and stay alive without being one-shotted. It's that strong. And because of that, this is strong cheese. It's an absolute pain in the neck to fight against. Our next set is Azureblight Reaper. Now if you're unsure what this does, basically when you dot somebody up, it explodes doing disease damage, which can proc obviously Defile. It's an AoE ability, it's free damage, it's lots of free damage, and that is the issue. If you pair this with other proc sets like Shadow of the Red Mountain, Plague Slinger maybe, Valken Scoria, double dot poisons, you can proc this really quickly, lots of free damage, put it on a high health tank build, you're unkillable, you can sort of kill bad players, and that is the problem with this. So for me, in things like Battlegrounds and no CP, it can be heavily abused, and as such it's a mild strength cheese. Our next set is Essence Thief, and this is a really unusual set to put on here, but if you put this in a duel on things like Stamina Dragon Knights, you are pretty much unkillable with stupidly high sustain and really high damage. If you're unaware, when you do damage with this, you basically put a big light ball down, go to it, get loads of health, get loads of stamina, increase your damage for 10 seconds, so a 10-second cooldown, so basically 100% uptime in duels, free damage, free sustain, free healing. You see, it's pretty busted when you kind of look at it like that. So for me, it's a mild strength cheese because it only really works well in duels, and that's about it. Our next set is Poisonous Serpent, and you're probably going, why is that on this list? And well, for me, it's just free damage again. Sets that give you lots of free damage for very little effort are a little bit busted because they can be abused heavily. If you think back to kind of the days of sort of Imperial City, when you had Vipers, Viper was just absolutely crazy. And this is very similar to that. Basically, you light attack somebody, you do poison damage to them. hits really hard, it's no resource cost, you can spam this like indefinitely, it's got a really high uptime, paired us on a stamina nightblade which you can get in and out, so if you don't kill them just go back and cloak, then try again. You can see it can be quite annoying to fight against, especially in no CP. As such, this is a mild strength cheese. Now our next set is an unusual one to put on here, you probably will go, and it's Destructive Impact. Now for me, the set isn't too bad on an Inferno stuff because the clench is nice and it makes it somewhat useful, but the damage still isn't there. What makes this busted though is if you put it on a shock staff or on an ice staff. So on a shock staff you just turn it into an AoE ability that costs 1700 magicka and it does like 10 to 11,000 damage. So it's basically an AoE that does 10 to 11k damage. Dirt cheap, really good on Magical Ward and really good on Magical Necromancer. And on an ice staff, you basically turn it into kind of a 7 to 9,000, closer to 9,000 in all honesty. Ice spammable that immobilises people on cooldown. So you can literally just spam that and just lock people to the floor and they cannot move. And it's really frustrating to fight against. So those are the kind of why I think it's a little bit cheesy. So for me, it's a mild strength cheese. It's not too bad because it's hard to get. You do lose a lot for running it, but you also gain so much at the same time. Our next set is Falcon Scoria, and for me this is a really cheesy set because it's loads of free damage and you can't dodge it, and that's the big problem. Like yes, it's telegraphed now, but you can't dodge it, so it's just undodgeable damage and it hits really hard, especially if you're a vampire. And well, with Greymore around the corner, you can see this can become even more and more busted. So for me, this is a medium strength cheese, especially on things like Magicka Dragonite, even Magplar, so yeah, quite strong. Now, I've noticed that many of you at home, yes, you watching right now, are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're unaware, this channel is all about helping you get better with next level builds, guides and gameplay. And if you want to improve, then make sure that you're subscribed and you turn on the bell so you don't miss anything, as we're going to be covering the PTS for Greymore next week extensively, so make sure that you don't miss out on those things. Now let's get back to that video. Another busted set is Imperial Physique. Now if you're unaware, this just gives you loads of health, magicka and stamina the more Telva you have, and this is basically the best damage that you can get in the game because of just the resource that it gives you. But what makes this really busted though is the fact that yes, it's high risk and high reward, but if you put this on a healer, so a support build, they can keep themselves alive and their entire team alive without any real effort. And so for me, it can be a bit cheesy if it's abused on healers. As such, I'd rank this as a medium strength cheese. It's not too bad, but it can be abused easily. Another bustic set is the Master's Bow Caustic Arrow. If you're unaware, when you get this weapon, it basically gives you an extra 300 weapon damage against a target. And yes, it's only 300 damage, but it's just free damage, and it can be hard to get, I get that, but if you use this on things like Nightblades, or even like my Stamina Warden or my Stamina Necromancer, you can backbar it with an infused glyph, so it basically gives you 700 weapon damage against a target, which is a massive damage buff, and it's got 100% uptime, and that there is the issue. It can be abused, it is a little bit cheesy, but it is a good set at the same time. As such, I'll just kind of rank this as a medium cheese. It's not horrific, but if you compare any other two pieces, it is vastly better than a lot of them, and that there is the problem. Another really kind of strong set is New Moon Acolyte. Yes, it's a relatively new set, but it doesn't take a genius to go onto YouTube and just type in any stamina build to see that every stamina build is running this set. And that will tell you there that if everybody's using it, it's got to be pretty strong. And I would argue that it's probably the strongest stamina set in the game thus far. The 5% cost increase to your abilities really isn't drastic. And so for me, I would rank this kind of like medium cheese because you can heavily abuse it, getting like 6 to 7,000 weapon damage quite easily on most builds nowadays. And that is the issue. Before, that was like a myth, that was so hard to get, but now you have it like all the time. And for me, it's a medium cheese because of it. Our next set is Ward of Cyrodiil, and this is a really powerful set if used right. It basically gives classes access to Major Defile if they don't have it already. And with the healing meta being as it is, if you defile somebody, they can't heal through it quite easily. So this can become very potent if you use the right build with this set. And that, for me, that is the problem, that being able to just stop somebody from healing, stops them from recovering, you just basically out-sustain them and just burn them down. They die eventually. And that is why this set's rather strong in my opinion. So for me, it's a medium strength cheese. It's not overly overpowered, but it's pretty nasty in duels especially. Another busted set is More of the Infernal. And if you're unaware, this is the one that summons that big Daedroth that breathes fire. The damage isn't bad actually. The thing that makes it really frustrating is that it's another targetable enemy, which means that it absorbs lots of damage for obviously the caster or the person who's using it. And if you pair it with other sets and other classes, things like, you know, Magical Sorcerer with the Twilight and the Familiar, you've now got 3 pets on. You've got your Greater Storm attribute. You end up being a bloody zoo. That is the problem. So for me, it is definitely cheesy on certain specs, especially in things like Duels and Battlegrounds. So it's a medium strength cheese. Now this next set, I'm really unsure whether to kind of cover it, but I'm going to, okay? Because it's really, really strong on pretty much any stamina class. And it's not one that people talk about because it is really busted, but it's Affliction. And hear me out, okay? Affliction doesn't give you crazy healing, doesn't give you crazy weapon damage, but the 5 piece is what makes it special. The 2, 3 and 4 pieces are really good, but the 5 piece is where the cheese lies. It's got a 50% chance to proc when you do any damage. So any form of damage you do, dots, poisons, weapon skills, spammables, you name it, anything that you do to damage that target could proc this set. And it's got a 50% chance to proc. There's no cooldown on it, so if you have basically double dot poisons, you can basically keep this proccing every single second reliably. If you chuck in another dot or 2 from your class, you can proc it every second at least, if not slightly more. The damage is around 2k in CP, 2.5k give or take for the good CP loadout and penetration and stuff. And so it hits rather hard consistently. It's like an extra 1000 to 2000 sort of damage every single second, which there's very few dots in the game that have this much bonus damage. And what makes it worse, it puts minor defile on your target so they cannot heal properly. It's like a 15% damage reduction, and if you spec them to befoul, they can't even heal even more than that. So for me, it's very, very strong. There's a mate of mine that runs this on a Stamina Nightblade, 34,000 health, and I literally watch him go up to people. They can't kill him because his health is just too high, and he literally just lights attack, surprise attack, double dot poisons proc. This set procs rapidly, they die really, really fast because you can't heal through it. Chuck and Soul Harvest for major defile, you've got major and minor defile built into your kit, you've got 30 odd k health so you can't be killed, and you can just basically cheese people down with this set. Stupidly busted. So for me, this is a very strong set, it's a strong cheesy set. Now our next set, you're probably going to go, what Dan, seriously? But Blessing of Potatoes, or Potente is its proper name, is really, really strong. And the reason why I say that is because actually everybody on YouTube is running that set, which tells you it's probably a good set if everybody's using it. And the fact that you can backbar it with sets like Spinners, New Moon Acolytes, you know, Spriggans for example, it's just basically a flat damage reduction, which if you put that on a backbar, you can't bypass it with penetration, and that is the issue. Any kind of percent set, yes, it gets reduced with how it calculates, it's still much better than a flat value set because you can't bypass it with penetration, and that is the issue. So for me, because it's so easy to get, it's got such a strong 2-piece bonus, it is rather strong, and I do use it because it's strong, but it is quite a strong cheesy set in all honesty. Caluurion's Legacy is an absolute pain in the neck if you're fighting against it. It hits stupidly hard for very little effort. You can literally put this on a Magical Nightblade and have pretty much 100% uptime on demand. That's the key thing, it's on demand. So you reduce or just remove that chance to proc because you can control it, and it hits stupidly hard. This is the one set that really makes Magical Nightblade be able to gank people. So if you use this with like Spinners for example, and then any damage monster set, you hit really hard very quickly, and if people aren't paying attention, they've got like 22k health or thereabouts, you can one-shot them from stealth, which, as you can see, that does sound a little bit busted. So for me, it's a very strong cheesy set, especially in things like Battlegrounds, or if you're using it on a gank build. If you use it in open world Cyrodiil with CP, it's not great, but like with all of these sets, if you use them in certain ways, they can be busted. Now the strong stuff, guys, we have Draugrkin's Grip. If you're unaware, basically, when you dot somebody up or just do any form of damage to them whilst this is active, you get the bonus damage on every single form of damage you do pretty much. So poisons, dots, weapon skills, class skills, damage delayed abilities, anything you do. Is it bugged? I'm not quite sure, but all I know is from testing it that it procced on everything I did on a Magical Warden, and I was able to make it into a dot build, which, considering dots are pretty does say a lot about how good this set actually is. So if you put this on, say, Magicka Dragonite or Magicka Templar, then you get a stupid amount of bonus damage. So for me, this is a strong cheese set. Another really strong set is Caluurion's Nightmare. I probably butchered that pronunciation. But basically this is a really good set because it's got incredibly high damage or a stun. So for things like Magical Warden, which you lack a really good stun in all honesty, this can be a great set to pair on say like a control build where you're using the Master's Ice Staff. Master's Ice Staff plus this set, you basically just lock people in place, drain their stamina, or you hit them really hard with this. And so for me it can be very easily abused, and as such it's a strong set, especially in no CP. If you took this to CP Cyrodiil, it's pretty terrible, so no CP, duels, battlegrounds, pretty decent. CP, it's not great. But even so, because of how good it is in duels and battlegrounds, for me it's strong cheese. Another really strong cheesy set is Shadowrend, surprisingly. And lots of you going, Shadowrend? But Shadowrend is really just frustrating to fight in duels because it's basically like having Wizard's Riposte on at all times. So you basically become incredibly tanky because of Minor Maim active at all times, which if you're unaware is like one of the best forms of damage reduction in the game. It then does damage, you can't attack it, it's got pretty much 100% uptime as well, and it gives you recovery on top. So with that one set it basically makes you tanky, does damage, and it gives you sustain. As such, in a duel it is very strong, like it's really noticeable if someone has got that against you. Beyond that it's pretty so in a duel it's very strong, anywhere else it's pretty terrible. So because of that it's a strong cheese set if you use it in duels obviously. We've now got another monster set again, as you can tell they're pretty strong. Draugrkin or Draugrkin or however you say it, but this set, oh my goodness, I really hate this set. Fighting against it is ridiculous, like actually ridiculous. So if you're unaware, what makes this really nuts is the fact that you put kind of Minor Maim on the target, so which means they hit you for significantly less, or any of your allies for significantly less, and Minor Defile, so they can't heal as much, and it's basically got 100% uptime. It's an AoE, anybody who walks into the area gets it, they get it whilst they're in the area, the debuff stays on whilst they leave the area, and so because of that, it is really busted. Put this in a small man group and the group is significantly tankier as a result, and what's more, anybody who attacks that group will be hit with like Minor Defile, and then they won't be able to heal as easily. So because of that kind of just such a strong two-piece bonus, it's very cheesy, and so I call this like a strong cheese set. Put this on in a duel, in sort of open world Cyrodiil, in tower fights, and you're incredibly tanky as a result, with very little effort. The next set is Meridia's Blessed Armour. Now this set, when you use this in things like duels, is where it shines. Anywhere else it's absolute garbage, but put this on in a duel and you are unkillable pretty much. Any class that does not have access to Purge, or is even equipping Purge, will not be able to kill you pretty much. Like they just can't damage you, that's the problem with it. So when you block an attack, you have a 33% chance to blind them, which means all of their attacks and any dots, any damage they do to you, for 5 seconds misses, 100% dodge chance. Like, you dodge everything they do. And it's got a 10-second cooldown, so basically you get like a 50% uptime for half the fight. This thing is active, which means they only got like 5 seconds to try and kill you before it reprocs. And as you know, the way in which this game is, it's quite hard to line burst up if they're moving around and stuff. And well, because of that, it is so cheesy to fight against. Like, it's banned in most sort of dueling competitions because of how busted this is. So for me, this is like proper vintage cheese. Like, this is the really strong stuff that you get. The next set I want to talk about is the Concentrated Force Perfected Inferno Staff. Basically, the Asylum Perfected Inferno Staff. This is really good, like stupidly good. If you're unaware, Force Shock is pretty terrible by itself. But with this like staff, you turn it from being terrible to like God mode. It's so strong. Basically, it applies minor vulnerability to the target, so they take 8% more damage from anybody, including yourself. You apply burn-in to the target, so they take a burn-in sort of dot, so they get damage done to them. And you also apply chill to them on every other cast as well. And basically that reduces their damage done, so damage they do to you or other people, by 15%. So this, like every other cast, basically means they take more damage from anybody that hits them. They do less damage themselves, and they also get a dot on them which just hurts them anyway. And you can do this every other cast. And you compare this with things like Blockade of Ice, so if they're chilled and they walk on top of it, they get immobilized. So you can literally go False Pulse, Blockade of Ice, False Pulse. If they walk on top of it, they get immobilized. And they're taking more damage and they've got burning on. You can see this is very easily abused, especially in duels. So for me, this is proper vintage cheese, like really, really strong stuff here, guys. The next set is Spectral Cloak. Now this set is incredibly strong. It's basically Black Rose dual wield. When you activate Blade Cloak or those morphs, you obviously get the skills effect and you get major protection chucked in on top. Now what makes this really busted is the fact that major protection is incredibly hard to get. It's hard to kind of keep it up, it's hard to kind of maintain it, there's very few sources of it, but this set gives you like 100% on demand major protection when you want it. And the skill was dirt cheap, like it's like 1900 stamina. You get major protection, major evasion, major expedition, so you take less AoE damage, you take less damage overall, and you move incredibly fast. It also does an AoE dot around you, which means you can proc poisons on it, like stand still poison, so it pays for itself. It's really, really busted. And well, it makes anybody kind of mediocre like absolutely god tier. So for me, this is like vintage cheese, like proper vintage cheese. It's being nerfed next patch if you're unaware, so you may want to run this for like the last few weeks that you can, but it is being gutted because it's so strong, even the normal version. Now this wouldn't be like proper cheese if we didn't talk about obviously Black Rose restoration stuff, so Mender's Ward. When you cast like Healing Ward or Mender's Ward, any of those kind of ward skills in the restoration staff, it gives you major vitality, and you can apply this to other people you hit with the skill too, so you've got access to like good group synergy there. Major vitality increases your healing taken by 30%. You can obviously pair this also with Major Mending, which increases your healing done by 30%, so they basically stack together. So you go from having like very bad healing to like absolutely god mode healing. If you put this on like a Magicka Nightblade, which is very squishy innately, and then you run this like weapon here, you just turn like those off heals, those little sort of heals every now and again to like stupidly crazy high heals, which means you can bounce back really fast and like pretty much unkillable in a one-on-one in a duel. This is also true for Magicka Dragonite as well, so classes that have lots of heal over times, this set is absolutely phenomenal. And so for me, this is proper vintage cheese, like really strong stuff if you abuse it on the right class, on the right spec. Now there's a few sets that are not on the list that you probably go, oh, that's quite a strong set, Dan, and well, yes, there are a few sets that are kind of like honourable mentions, so I'm going to go through and just talk about a few sets that are pretty good actually, but I wouldn't say they're quite cheesy because they're just not that level there. So for example, Bloodspawn could make this like list for mild cheese if you think about what it does. Armor, Ultimate Generation and Stamina Sustain with a very high uptime. It's a very strong set, but for me it's like a staple for most builds, and actually you need to kind of have some skill to be able to sort of play with that set, so I wouldn't say it's cheesy in all honesty. Is it strong? Yes. Is it cheesy? Probably not. Another set that comes to mind is Pirate Skeleton. Now if you said this 2-3 months ago, Dan, Pirate Skeleton, agree 100%, busted, broken, terrible, like crazy, but it's been gutted. It's nowhere near as good as it was. It's got like a 50% uptime. You've got major defile on yourself when you get this kind of proc. You get major protection at the same time, but you get major defile. So for me, it kind of like the benefits outweigh one another and they're like the drawbacks. So I wouldn't say it's really busted. It's a strong set, definitely. Another set that also comes to mind is Chokerthorn. Now Chokerthorn is pretty strong in a duel. If you put this in a duel, you're really hard to be killed. But that's about it. And the healing from it isn't too high, and you can interrupt, you can bash it. So it's a strong set. Is it cheesy? Not really. Can it be abused? Somewhat, but which set can't be? Before we continue, I want to say a massive thank you to all of our Patreons. These remarkable individuals are really helping support the channel, supporting me, helping make this YouTube thing a reality, and obviously without their support it would be so much harder, so I really appreciate their support. And if you want to support myself or the channel, check out our YouTube, check out our description, our Patreon, and consider donating if you want, or donate in game. All of those things really help me with bills and all that stuff, so you've got a few options if you want to help the channel or myself. Now we've looked at a lot of sets, haven't we, today, guys? Loads of sets, ranging from your mild cheese, where it's not too bad in all honesty, but it is pretty strong, to your, oh my goodness, I am an absolute god with this set on. I am so good because I've got this set. And well, the aim of this video is really to help people just know what sets are really strong currently, and more importantly, how can we obviously let ZOS know, so that way they can maybe address some of these issues. Black Rose dual wield is being nerfed, so people do listen hopefully. And if I have missed a set, then obviously let me know in the comments. Go, Dan, this set is like absolutely busted. Like, yeah, let me know and I'll add it in. And if there's a set that you think, no, that's actually not quite right, I disagree with that, obviously comment too. It's always good to promote a discussion, have a debate. But with that said, guys, I am going to wrap this video up here because it is long enough. And if you want to see more from us, then obviously make sure you are subscribed. But with that said, guys, I will catch you in the next one. So thanks for watching, take care, and bye!